Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that feels, well, almost paradoxical. How do you cultivate strong leadership when growth is just happening at warp speed?
Right. It seems counterintuitive.
Exactly. And you, our listener, sent us some really fascinating sources. They look at a model called T4T, training for trainers, and also some really compelling patterns from the early days of Christianity.
Yeah, and it seems like when movements really, explode, the way leaders pop up and get developed is surprisingly different.
Very different from the maybe more traditional slow burn approaches we think of.
Absolutely. We often picture leadership development as this carefully managed long-term thing, maybe a bit formal.
Right, but these sources suggest that in these really dynamic, fast-moving environments, leadership tends to sort of bubble up.
Yeah, it multiplies much more organically. It's accelerated, definitely less top-down grooming, more self-replicating almost.
So that's exactly what we want to unpack in this deep dive. How does that actually happen? How do leaders surface and get the support they need when things are expanding so fast? Our goal here is really to pull out some practical insights. Things you might be able to apply, whether you're growing a team, a community project, or even just trying to understand how momentum builds.
And it's worth saying, like you mentioned, we're exploring the mechanics here, the principles.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at the how, not necessarily endorsing any specific viewpoint found in the sources.
Agreed. So the core idea, the engine of sustained growth, according to this material, it isn't just the initial buzz.
Right.
It's the ability to reproduce leadership itself. One source puts it really strongly. Sustained CPMs are, in essence, leadership multiplication movements.
Wow.
And then adds, the development and multiplication of leaders is what the Spirit uses to drive the movement. This is the spiritual engine. So leadership development isn't an add-on.
It's the engine itself.
It's a driving force, yeah.
Oh, that really paints a picture. You might get that initial spark, that rapid growth.
Sure.
But without a way to keep creating new leaders, that momentum just, it stalls out, right? Like a car engine without a transmission.
Exactly. The material really hammers this home. You must have a system in place that results in generations of reproducing leaders.
Generations. So it's not just about who's leading now, but building this pipeline, this self-sustaining thing.
And this is where that T4T model gets really interesting. The sources mention that before they used T4T, rapid growth often led to this leadership overload.
You can imagine, just stretched too thin.
Totally. But T4T, with its 3/3 process, seems to tackle this head on because it embeds leadership development right into its core structure.
How so?
Well, it's not just about learning stuff. It's about equipping everyone, right from the start, to immediately share and teach what they've just learned.
Ah, okay. So it's that idea of immediate responsibility, taking ownership quickly.
Yeah, exactly. The source mentions Ephesians 4 briefly, equipping the saints for ministry so the whole body builds itself up.
So growth isn't just the job of the few at the top.
Right. Everyone has a role in nurturing that expansion.
Right.
And T4T helps make that happen through what it calls loving accountability.
Loving accountability. Okay, what does that look like?
Well, the idea is that trainees become trainers. And they're encouraged, or held accountable maybe, to both stick to the core principles and actively try to expand the movement, like finding new people.
So it's dual focus.
Yeah.
Faithfulness and expansion.
Exactly. The source says T4T uses loving accountability to help trainees become trainers who, 1, follow Jesus, and 2, fish for men. And because everyone's passing it on.
Everyone gets a shot at leading.
Everyone gets the opportunity to grow as a leader. It's all woven together. Learning, doing, leading.
It's also interesting how the source says leaders kind of choose themselves.
Yeah, through obedience, right?
Yeah.
By actually starting their own groups. They step up by taking that first action.
But it's not totally hands-off, is it? The source clarifies that.
No, definitely not laissez-faire. It stresses that, casting the vision, making some initial appointments, that's still really key, especially early on.
To create the environment for that to happen.
Right, to set the stage so people can step up.
Which leads to another really crucial point they make. Leadership needs change.
Oh, massively. What a brand new leader of a tiny home group needs.
Yeah.
Totally different from what someone leading a big established organization needs. Character, skills, everything.
Makes perfect sense. The source says it plainly. What a new leader needs is very different from what a mature leader needs.
So you can't apply the same checklist to everyone at every stage.
Right. You wouldn't expect a trainee to suddenly have CEO-level skills.
Yeah.
The takeaway seems to be, focus on the basics needed for that initial stage.
Meet people where they are. Identify and nurture those foundational qualities first.
And to illustrate this, the source looks at Jesus developing his own disciples.
Yeah, and it kind of pushes back against this simple idea that they were instantly apostles, you know.
Right, it wasn't overnight.
No, it was gradual, staged, increasing responsibility over time.
Okay, so break that down. What was stage 1 like?
Stage 1, you see it in John chapter 1, it's initial encounters. Jesus makes pretty small requests, observes their reactions.
Like command.
Like, come and see, little
Yeah.
statements. It's not yet, drop everything and follow me. He's testing the waters, seeing who's responsive. Development through small acts of obedience.
Okay, observation in small steps. Then stage 2.
Stage 2, this is more like Mark 1, Luke 5. Around the Sea of Galilee. By now, there's a relationship.
Right.
And Jesus makes bigger asks. Using their boat, that miraculous catch of fish.
Yeah.
And then comes the call to full-time commitment.
Ah, so the commitment follows demonstrated willingness and a bigger task.
Exactly. More significant tasks, more focused time learning directly from him,
Yeah.
deeper involvement.
And stage 3.
Stage 3 is the final formal selection of the 12. Luke 6, Mark 3. They become apostles, given more authority, sent out.
And that was a big decision.
Huge. It says Jesus prayed all night before choosing them. Their responsibilities ramp up significantly then. More focused attention, more direct mentorship.
So looking at that whole process, what are the key principles we can pull out?
Well, one big one is starting small. Give small assignments first. See who's faithful.
Like the parable of the talents, right? Faithful in little, entrusted with much.
Exactly. That principle is right there. Then, if they prove faithful, you increase responsibility.
Okay. What else?
Prioritize faithfulness over initial skill. This is huge.
Yeah, that feels countercultural sometimes.
It is. But the source says it is easier to take a faithful man and teach him skills than to take a skillful man and teach him faithfulness.
Wow. So character first, reliability. That's the bedrock.
That's the bedrock. You can teach the how-to, but the will-do, the faithfulness. But that's deeper.
Okay, makes sense.
Also, invest more time in those who are proving fruitful.
Don't spend all your energy on the least responsive.
Right. It's a common trap, apparently. Focus on empowering those who are actually growing and making an impact. Maximize your investment.
That's practical advice.
And then don't overlook unlikely prospects.
Yeah.
People who are hungry, teachable, they might not fit the traditional mold.
Like David's mighty men who came from distressed backgrounds.
Exactly. The source points to examples like that. God often chooses people others might dismiss.
So potential can be hidden.
And you need to see it and speak to it. Like Jesus renaming Simon to Peter Rock.
Before he was always rock solid.
Right. Speaking vision into someone. And that quote about leaders rising up from hell. It's intense, but it means transformation is possible even from really tough pasts.
If the desire for change is there.
If that hunger is there. And there's this mention of the forceful nature of those who grab hold of change, like in Matthew and Luke. A certain determination.
In the T4T model, it aims to be a safe place for that development.
Yeah, a place to try, maybe stumble, but learn and be observed with guidance.
Okay. Now, the source shifts slightly to talk about a post-Pentecost advantage. What's that about?
Right. The idea is that after Pentecost, with the Holy Spirit given, leadership development can actually happen, well, faster, more rapidly than even when Jesus was physically present.
How so?
Because the Spirit indwells believers, actively helping them mature. The source says, we use the developmental leadership principles of Jesus, but benefit from the presence of Jesus through his Spirit.
So the mentor doesn't have to be physically there 204/7.
Exactly. You do not have to be constantly present. Instead, your role is to help them learn how to listen to and respond to Jesus. It empowers that direct connection. And CPM, by the way, usually means church planting movements in this context.
Got it. Thanks. So it's about leveraging that spiritual resource for growth.
And the potential is huge.
Yeah.
They quote John 14.1, believers doing even greater works. It points to this accelerated potential.
Okay, but here's a common tension, right? Rapidly developing new believers. How does that square with, say, Paul's lists of qualifications for leaders, like in Timothy?
Ah, yes. The source tackles this directly. And it's really insightful. It contrasts Paul's instructions to Titus with his instructions to Timothy.
Because the situations were different.
Exactly. Context is everything. Titus was dealing with brand new churches on Crete. Basically, everyone was a new believer.
So you couldn't insist on not a recent convert.
Right. You'd have no leaders. So in Titus 1, the focus is on appointing leaders based on fundamental character change.
no longer's.
Precisely. No longer living wildly, no longer rebellious, not quick-tempered, not greedy, etc. It's about seeing that transformation from a negative past. That's the key qualification.
And what about knowledge or teaching ability?
For Titus, the bar was holding fast to the core message, being able to use it for encouragement and correction, not necessarily being a skilled, eloquent teacher yet, just holding on to the truth as the authority.
Okay, so that's Crete. New churches focus on appointment and basic transformation. What about Ephesus in 1 Timothy?
Ephesus was a more mature, established church. So in 1 Timothy 3, Paul talks about those who aspire to leadership. The bar is higher.
That's where not a recent convert comes in.
Yes, to avoid pride. And there's more emphasis on established character, reputation, and being able to teach. A higher skill level is expected.
So let's summarize the key differences, Crete versus Ephesus.
Okay, so Crete, you often appoint leaders out of necessity. Ephesus, people might aspire to it.
Right.
Crete, not a recent convert, is basically waived, but you look for devotion. Ephesus, that qualification is important.
Got it.
Crete, focus on the no longer's evidence of turning from sin. Ephesus, focus on established positive character.
And the teaching part.
Crete,
Yeah.
hold fast to the word as authority. Ephesus, able to teach the word effectively and develop skill.
So the big principle, especially for rapid growth.
Character first. Foundational character transformation trumps polished skills initially. Identify faithfulness, then build the skills.
Okay. So how does T4T practically do this? What are the mechanisms for developing these different levels of leaders?
Right, the source outlines 3 levels. First, the basic trainers, the leaders of the new small groups or churches.
How are they developed?
Mostly on the job, within that regular 3/3 meeting structure, over maybe 9-18 months. The pastoral care part of the meeting is where a lot of that coaching happens.
Okay. Integrated development. What's the next level?
Mid-level trainers.
Yeah.
These are people overseeing multiple groups, multiple generations,
And their development.
often through periodic retreats. Could be a day, could be longer. Focused time for rest, encouragement, more equipping, planning. Again, often using that look back, look up, look forward structure.
Like Inkai's training center is mentioned.
Exactly. Those sound like examples of these mid-level events, maybe 3-4 times a year, adaptable.
And the top level.
The big trainers, leading whole streams or networks. Their development is more like intensive mentorship.
The MAWL thing.
Yeah. Model, assist, watch, leave. Similar to how Jesus and Paul invested deeply in a few key people. The goal is independence. They need to be able to lead on their own and develop the mid-level folks too.
That tiered approach makes sense. The source also includes a personal story from Inkai, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. About overcoming a bad temper. Really powerful. Through practicing thanksgiving and praise, citing Psalm 22 and Ephesians 5.
And the point is,
That transformation is real. Even people with significant struggles can change and become leaders. It connects back to that rising from hell idea.
okay. And that ties into the case study about the Aina people.
Perfectly. The national partners were hesitant. They were looking at these new Aina believers through the lens of their established church leaders.
Applying the 1 Timothy standard too early.
Exactly. They didn't see maturity. But the breakthrough came when they shifted to the Titus 1 no longer standard.
Asking different questions.
Right. Not, are they polished, but are they changing? Were they known as liars, drunkards, lazy, mean, but are no longer living that way?
And when they looked for that.
They found potential leaders, people who were demonstrating transformation. It adjusted their expectations.
And they appointed multiple leaders in each church.
Yes, like in Acts 14.
Ah.
Shared the load, reduced the fear of overwhelming one new person. It worked.
It really shows the importance of using the right framework for the right stage.
Absolutely. And the source adds that little warning.
Yeah.
The ticking clock.
Need.
Meaning you need to plan for developing those mid-level leaders before you desperately need them. Be proactive.
Okay, so let's try and wrap up the main takeaways from this deep dive.
All right. First, sustained movements run on leadership multiplication. It's the engine.
Got it. Second.
Development often follows Jesus' model, proving faithfulness through doing the ministry, starting small.
Okay. Third.
For new movements, use the Titus 1 qualifications. Focus on character transformation, the no longers.
Right. Context matters. And fourth.
Effective systems like T4T have built-in ways to develop leaders at all levels, trainers, mid-level, and big trainers.
It's a comprehensive, dynamic picture.
Very different from just waiting for leaders to somehow appear fully formed. It's intentional, but organic too.
So as you, listening, reflect on these ideas, the staged responsibility, focusing on character first, proactively nurturing potential. How might these principles change things in your context, your team, your project, your community?
Yeah, what are the small assignments you could offer to see who's faithful, who shows up?
And whose potential could you start speaking into, maybe even before they see it themselves?
Lots to think about there.
Definitely. We hope this deep dive has sparked some new thoughts and maybe some practical next steps for you. Thanks for joining us.